That will be the first news conference of the controllers in the Manned Space Center who were on duty as this spacecraft was placed in orbit, and it should be an interesting news conference. We were saying the spacecraft information from the onboard computers shows the orbit to be 71.3 statute miles by 69.92 statute miles, which averages out right at 70 and is just about perfect. Actually, the information, though, from the tracking stations indicates that the spacecraft is right at the 70-mile mark, with just 4/10 of a mile difference between its apogee and its perigee. Its apogee comes, that is the high point of its circle of the moon, and that's only, as I say, 4/10 of a mile higher than its low point, but its high point comes on this side of the moon, its low point on the far side of the moon. There seems to be some problem with communications at the moment from the spacecraft. The dimensions of that problem we do not know as yet. We have no information. Perhaps, is there something coming in now? I thought I saw a signal that there was. Perhaps we will get some explanation of the problem soon from Houston. But we have heard no voice transmission from the spacecraft as of this pass, except the very first few words that they, as they began to read out the information on apogee and perigee. The spacecraft communications links are such that voice communication could be interfered with and out, while the telemetry information, which is far more important, the engineering data, is being transmitted all right. We just do not know the dimensions, as we say, of the communications problem as yet. At this point, from this orbit, at any time, the spacecraft could begin its return to Earth. It is going to get a go, revolution by revolution of the moon. In other words, in concert between the spacecraft and the men in the Manned Space Center in Houston, the decision will be made as to whether they should go around another time, each time they come around. This is the third pass across the face of the moon. Since they went into that orbit at 5 o'clock this morning, they will make another decision whether to go for the fourth revolution on this pass, and so on until they get to that 10th revolution, and at that time fire to come home. If they want to make a change in that plan, they could fire their return rocket at any point. The rocket engine of that service propulsion system has worked now perfectly in every firing for 2 mid-course corrections and for the 2 lunar orbit insertion maneuvers. The first to get into lunar orbit, and which was a more powerful retrograde or braking motion, and the second a small adjustment to put it into a perfect circular orbit around the moon. Now one more firing is required. For the thousands of people working to support this flight, and I might add to those of us reporting on it as well, its timing does mean, for many people, being away from home on Christmas. For the 3 Apollo 8 astronauts, of course, the separation is far more meaningful, 238,000 miles, since they'll be leaving the moon tomorrow, Christmas morning. The 3 men have 11 children between them, and David Shoemaker asked them about being away at Christmas time.
Different situation than many of the people that'll be on board the carrier, or people like yourself that have to work but won't be as, I guess you could say, as intimately concerned with what's going on, because we'll be out there really doing the mission. But and I don't like being away on Christmas, and I really feel the sacrifice that people like yourself are making. I think Christmas is a wonderful holiday. On the other hand, I think what we're doing is worthwhile, and you just can't call a halt to things. The geometry of the situation doesn't recognize the fact that Christmas comes at this particular time of the year, I guess.
As a matter of fact, before the change of missions, you know, I was a backup on this mission, which was after the next one, really. I had planned to take the whole family to Mexico for Christmas. We even went so far as, you know, buying swimming suits and everything, and during the off season to get ready to go. And when I got home one day, my wife said, now you better call up and make those hotel reservations. You know, Christmas time down there, it's pretty busy. And I said, well, I don't think I'm going to go to Mexico on Christmas. And, well, why not? The children are expecting to go to Mexico, you know. I said, I think I'll go someplace else for Christmas. But they've adjusted themselves quite well to the flight, and we'll get together after the flight, of course.
Well, my children have had Dad away from home before on Christmas, so it won't be a completely new experience for them. But we'll have a little bit before and a little bit afterwards and kind of spread it out this year.
We have heard from Mission Control now a little bit of voice communication between the spacecraft and Mission Control. They're well in touch. There is a lot of noise on the circuit, but they're clearly understandable. Perhaps we could even listen in for a moment to give you an idea of how it's going. It's all engineering data they're transmitting at the moment, but let's listen in. Like the sudden silence at a dinner party. They suddenly quit talking the moment we tune in. You're hearing background conversation from Mission Control, and that may be up to the spacecraft and not being fed to us, the public, although it may not as well. But anyway, the transmission a moment ago was quite clear, perfectly understandable, but this rather high level of background noise and interference. During this pass across the face of the moon and for the remaining, for the next 5 passes around the moon, up through the 8th pass, and this is the 3rd, the main function will be photography. Still pictures, strip stereo photos, that is a series of pictures, one taken every 20 seconds, so that the entire path of the spacecraft across the face of the moon will be shown in one long strip. And the motion pictures, long lens, telephoto pictures, wide-angle lens, color, black and white, all to be taken by Bill Anders, who sits on that right-hand seat of the 3 seats abreast in the spacecraft, who is technically the LEM pilot. That's the Lunar Module pilot. The Lunar Module is that funny spider-legged spacecraft that will make the actual descent to the moon with 2 of the 3 Apollo astronauts on future flights, and then will ascend again, leaving part of the spacecraft, that is the LEM, on the surface of the moon as a launching platform, taking the 2 spacemen back to rendezvous with the Apollo that will be in charge of the single space mission commander, and then for return to Earth. Well, Anders is the LEM pilot, but there is no LEM on this flight, so he's in charge of photography. Jim Lovell, who sits in the center seat and is the spacecraft pilot, is in charge of navigation, and on these next 5 passes of the moon's surface, he will be taking visual observations and tracking landmark information, data, to pass on to the men who eventually will have to make that landing. The landing has to be made at a precise location. Obviously, a spacecraft landing on those volcanic sides of the craters and in the rills and ridges might very well tilt over and not be able to launch the astronauts back from the surface of the Earth. So they don't want that to happen. They're going to pick that landing site quite accurately. And part of the reason for this flight is to pick such a spot, to confirm that the spots that have been picked out of the pictures from the moon are good places to land, and to check the landmarks in all sorts of lighting conditions. When the lighting conditions will change as the moon moves 12 degrees around, the sun moves around, well, the moon's moving around, but the sun is moving on the surface of the moon around, and the lighting conditions change. They want to check it for all conditions and times. That's why a 20-hour orbit of the moon, almost a full day. CBS News color coverage of the flight of Apollo 8 will continue in a moment.